My name is Alexander Kane, and I'm 29 years old. For 12 years, my parents treated me like the black sheep of our wealthy family, while my twin brother Marcus was crowned the golden child. Every Christmas, every family celebration, I was either ignored completely or actively humiliated in front of our elite social circle. But last Christmas, when my mother literally uninvited me from our family gathering because I didn't fit the image they wanted to project, I decided to do something that would shake our family to its core. What happened next didn't just expose the truth about our family's fortune. It revealed a secret so explosive that it made headlines across 3 countries and left my parents begging me not to destroy them completely. Before I tell you how I went from being the family embarrassment to hosting the most exclusive Christmas party on the East Coast, please hit that like button if you enjoy stories about karma serving justice on a silver platter. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what your family dynamics are like. Drop a comment below. I read every single one and often reply personally. Now, let me take you back to that December morning when everything changed forever. I was sitting in my Malibu office overlooking the Pacific Ocean when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mother, and my stomach immediately tightened. In our family's Connecticut mansion, Christmas preparations were probably in full swing. I knew because I'd been part of those preparations for 29 years, always as an afterthought, always as the disappointment. Alexander, my mother Victoria said in that ice-cold tone she reserved specifically for me. No greeting, no warmth, just pure dismissal. I'm calling to save us all some embarrassment this Christmas. I set down my coffee and braced myself. What's happening this Christmas, Mother? Marcus is bringing his new fiancée, Catherine. She's from the Whitmore family. You know, the hotel empire. This is a very important relationship for our family's reputation. She paused, and I could practically see her pursing her lips in that way she did when she was about to deliver a blow. We've decided it's best if you don't attend this year. The words hit me like a physical slap. You're uninviting me from Christmas? It's not uninviting, darling. It's being realistic about what's best for everyone. Catherine comes from a very distinguished family. Her parents will be there, along with several prominent business leaders. We can't have you, well, being yourself, being myself. Code for being the son who hadn't followed the predetermined path. The son who'd chosen his own career instead of joining the family investment firm. The son who'd been written off as a failure despite building something they couldn't even comprehend. What exactly is it about me being myself that concerns you? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Alexander, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. You know how you get at these gatherings. All that talk about your little tech hobby, making people uncomfortable with your intensity. Marcus and Catherine need this to go smoothly. My little tech hobby. If only she knew. And what should I tell people when they ask where I am? We'll simply say you're traveling for work. It's not entirely untrue. Don't you have some conference or something coming up? I looked at my calendar where CES 2024, keynote speaker, was blocked off for the first week of January. The Consumer Electronics Show, where I'd be presenting my company's latest breakthrough to an audience of 50,000 industry leaders. But why would she know that? She'd never asked. Mother, what if I told you that my little tech hobby has been featured in Forbes, Wired, and TechCrunch in the past 6 months? She laughed. Actually laughed. Alexander, I know you like to exaggerate your projects, but Catherine's family deals with real success. Her father just closed a $2 billion acquisition. We need to focus on reality. Reality. The irony was suffocating. So I'm banned from Christmas because I embarrass the family? You're not banned, you're just... It's better this way. Marcus has worked so hard to build his reputation at Goldman Sachs. This relationship with Catherine could set him up for partner track. We can't have any distractions. I looked around my office. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, awards lining the walls, a view that most people would kill for. On my desk sat a prototype that would revolutionize how people interact with technology, and beside it, an invitation to address the World Economic Forum in Davos. "I see," I said quietly. "So this is about Marcus's career?" "This is about our family's future, Alexander. Surely you can understand that. Our family's future, a future that apparently didn't include their own son." "I need to go, Mother. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes. "Board meeting?" She sounded skeptical. "Alexander, I wish you'd stop with these fantasies. It would make everything so much easier." Fantasies. I looked at my computer screen, where an email from my CFO showed our Q4 revenue. $847 million. Nearly $1 billion in revenue, and my mother thought it was a fantasy. "Goodbye, Mother." "Alexander, I hope you understand this isn't personal. It's just business." I hung up and sat in the silence of my office. Outside, the waves crashed against the Malibu shoreline, and in the distance I could see my neighbor's house, a modest $30 million estate that belonged to a Hollywood director. My own house, the one I'd bought with my first major exit, sat on 12 acres and was worth significantly more. But my family had never seen it. They'd never been invited to California. They'd never asked about my life here. The funny thing about being the black sheep is that everyone assumes you're failing because you chose a different path. They never consider that you might be succeeding beyond their wildest dreams, just in a way they don't understand. I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to Marcus Kane, my twin brother, older by exactly 17 minutes, and never let me forget it. We'd been compared our entire lives, and he'd always come out on top. Better grades at prep school, better social connections at Harvard, better job on Wall Street. He was everything my parents wanted in a son, and I was everything they wished they could erase. But Marcus and I had a secret. Despite our parents' attempts to pit us against each other, we'd remained close. He knew about my success, even if he didn't fully understand the scope of it. And more importantly, he knew the truth about our family's finances, something our parents had been hiding for years. I dialed his number. "Alex." His voice was warm, genuine. "I was wondering when you'd call about the Christmas situation." "So you know about Mother's decision?" "She discussed it with me first." "Alex, I told her it was insane, but you know how she gets when she's in social climbing mode. Catherine's parents are intense. Old money, very traditional. Mother's terrified of making a bad impression." I could hear the guilt in his voice. "And you're okay with me being excluded?" "Hell no, I'm not okay with it. But I also know something they don't." "What's that?" "I know that my brother is about to become one of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley, and when the news breaks, our parents are going to look like complete fools." Marcus knew about the acquisition talks. He was one of the few people who understood that my tech hobby was actually a company that major corporations were fighting to buy. But even he didn't know the full extent of what was about to happen. "Marcus, what if I told you I've decided not to fight the uninvitation?" "I'd say that doesn't sound like the Alexander Kane who once rewrote the school's entire computer system because a teacher said it was impossible." I smiled despite everything. "What if I told you I'm planning something else entirely?" "I'd say I'm listening." "What if, instead of crashing their Christmas party, I hosted my own? Something so spectacular, so newsworthy, that every single person they're trying to impress would rather be at my event than theirs." The line was quiet for a moment. "Alex, what are you planning?" I looked at my calendar again, then at the contact list on my phone. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, tech titans, people who'd become friends over the years as my company had grown. People who actually valued what I'd built. I'm planning to show them who Alexander Kane really is. And Marcus? You're invited to both parties. Let's see which one you choose. After I hung up with Marcus, I sat in my office for a long moment, thinking about the pattern that had defined my relationship with my family for nearly 3 decades. It wasn't just about Christmas, it was about every single milestone they'd either ignored or actively diminished. When I'd graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with degrees in computer science and electrical engineering, my mother's response had been, "That's nice, dear." Marcus made law review at Harvard. When I'd sold my first startup for $50 million at age 24, they'd assumed it was some kind of fluke or lucky accident. "Must have been the right place at the right time," my father had said dismissively. When I'd been featured on the cover of Fortune's 30 Under 30 3 years ago, they'd managed to miss it entirely because they were too busy celebrating Marcus's promotion to vice president at his investment firm. The magazine had been sitting on their coffee table for 2 weeks before our housekeeper had finally thrown it away, never once opened. The truth was, they'd been so invested in their version of success, Ivy League credentials, Wall Street careers, country club memberships, that they couldn't recognize achievement in any other form. To them, technology was something for other people's children. Real success meant following the established path, joining the family firm, marrying within their social circle, and perpetuating their version of the American elite. But I'd learned something they never had. The real power wasn't in old money or established connections. It was in innovation, in building something the world didn't know it needed, in having the vision to see around corners while everyone else was staring straight ahead. My assistant knocked on the door, pulling me out of my thoughts. "Alex, your 2 o'clock is here? The documentary crew from Netflix?" "Right." I'd agreed to participate in a documentary about tech entrepreneurs who'd built billion-dollar companies before age 30. It was supposed to air next year, but I wondered if the timing might work out differently. "Send them in, Sarah. And after they leave, I need you to help me plan a party." "What kind of party?" I smiled, feeling a familiar energy building in my chest, the same feeling I'd had before every major product launch, every impossible deadline, every moment when everyone said it couldn't be done. The kind of party that changes everything. The Netflix documentary crew consisted of 3 people: a director named James Morrison who'd won an Emmy for his series on Silicon Valley, a cinematographer, and a sound engineer. They'd already interviewed Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and several other tech billionaires for this series. Being included in that group should have felt like validation, but honestly, external validation had stopped mattering to me years ago. "So, Alexander," James began once they'd set up their equipment, "tell us about the moment you knew you'd made it." I thought about the question as I watched the camera's red light blink on. "You know, that's interesting. Most people assume there's one moment, some dramatic revelation where everything clicks. But for me, it was the opposite. It was the moment I realized that making it, according to other people's standards, was completely irrelevant to what I was trying to build." "Can you elaborate on that?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the ocean. I come from a family where success has a very specific definition. Ivy League education, prestigious job, marriage within the right social circles. For years, I thought I was failing because I wasn't meeting those expectations. It took me a long time to realize I wasn't failing. I was just playing a completely different game. And what game were you playing? The game of building something that matters. Something that changes how people live, work, and connect with each other. My family sees technology as a hobby, but I see it as the most powerful tool for human advancement that's ever existed. James nodded, making notes. "Your company, Nexus Technologies, has been valued at $12 billion in recent acquisition talks. How does it feel to know you've built something worth more than most countries' GDP?" The numbers still felt surreal, even to me. Honestly, it feels like responsibility. $12 billion isn't just money. It's the collective belief of thousands of investors, employees, and users that what we've built matters. It's not about personal wealth. It's about having the resources to solve bigger problems. Speaking of family, the cinematographer interjected, I understand you come from a very wealthy Connecticut family. What was their reaction when your company took off? This was where it got complicated. They don't really know the extent of it. My parents are traditional. They see my work as a phase I'm going through before I settle down and join the family investment firm. James looked surprised. They don't know you're worth $12 billion? They've never asked. In their world, if it's not happening on Wall Street or in their social circle, it's not happening at all. That must be isolating. I considered this. It was, for a long time. But then I realized that seeking approval from people who fundamentally misunderstand what you're trying to accomplish is a waste of energy. I'd rather focus on building something extraordinary than convincing anyone, including my family, that it's extraordinary. What would you say to other entrepreneurs who are dealing with family members who don't understand their vision? I'd say that the people who matter will see your vision when it's ready to be seen, and the people who don't see it? Their opinion becomes irrelevant once you've proven what you set out to prove. James leaned forward. It sounds like there's a specific story there. I smiled, thinking about the Christmas party I was about to plan. Let's just say that sometimes the best way to show people who you really are is to stop hiding who you've become. After the documentary crew left, I sat alone in my office as the sun began to set over the Pacific. The conversation had clarified something for me. I was done being invisible to my own family. Not because I needed their approval, but because hiding my success had allowed them to continue treating me as a failure. It was enabling a dynamic that served no one. I picked up my phone and called my head of operations, Michael Chen, who'd been with me since the company's early days. Michael, I need you to help me plan an event. December 25th, Christmas Day? Here in Malibu? What kind of event? A Christmas celebration for about 200 people. A-list everything. I want the kind of party that ends up in Vanity Fair and makes the national news. Boss, that's 3 weeks away. Christmas parties are usually planned months in advance. I know, but we're not dealing with usually. We're dealing with unlimited budget and the kind of connections that can make impossible things happen. Michael was quiet for a moment. I could practically hear him thinking through the logistics. What's the occasion? I'm introducing Alexander Kane to people who've only met the family disappointment. Ah. He understood immediately. Michael had met my parents once at a company event they'd attended reluctantly. He'd watched them spend the entire evening dismissing my achievements while bragging about Marcus's latest promotion. Alex, you know I'm in. What are we thinking? Sit-down dinner? Cocktail party? Concert? All of the above. I want an event so spectacular that everyone who matters in entertainment, technology, and business will want to be there, instead of wherever else they were planning to spend Christmas. And your family? Will receive an invitation like everyone else. What they do with it is up to them. This is either brilliant or completely insane. In my experience, the best ideas are both. After hanging up with Michael, I walked out onto my office balcony and looked down at my estate. 12 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, a main house that could accommodate 50 guests, multiple guest houses, a recording studio where Grammy winners had laid down tracks, a wine cellar that had been featured in Architectural Digest, and a view that had served as the backdrop for 3 major motion pictures. This was the life I'd built, the success I'd achieved, the world I'd created. And my parents had never seen any of it because they'd never bothered to look. But in 3 weeks, they were going to see all of it, whether they wanted to or not. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. The first was to David Morrison, who directed some of the biggest music videos and live events of the past decade. His company had handled everything from Super Bowl halftime shows to presidential inaugurations. David, it's Alex Kane. I need a favor, and I need it to be spectacular. Alex, how are you? I heard about the acquisition rumors. Congratulations, man. Thanks. Listen, I'm throwing a Christmas party in 3 weeks, and I want it to be the kind of event people talk about for years. Christmas is already booked solid, Alex. Everyone who's anyone is already locked into their holiday plans. What if I told you I wanted to fly in performers who would make people cancel their other plans? I'd say you're talking about serious money. David, money isn't a factor. I want to create an event so extraordinary that it becomes the new standard for what a private party can be. Jesus, Alex! What's the occasion? Let's call it a coming out party. I thought you were already out. Wait, what kind of coming out? I laughed. Not that kind. I'm coming out as someone who's been hiding in plain sight for too long. David was quiet for a moment. You know what? I'm intrigued. Send me your vision and let's make some magic happen. The second call was to Elena Rodriguez, the most exclusive event planner on the West Coast. She'd handled parties for tech billionaires, Hollywood royalty, and heads of state. If anyone could pull together an impossible event on an impossible timeline, it was Elena. Alexander, darling, she answered on the first ring. I heard you might be calling. Word travels fast in this business. Elena, I need the impossible. Impossible is my specialty, but Christmas Day, 3 weeks' notice, A-list guest list, even I have limits. What would it take to exceed those limits? Complete creative control, unlimited budget, and the understanding that we're essentially creating a small festival, not just a party. Done. When can you come see the space? I'm in my car. I'll be there in an hour. The third call was to Marcus. Alex, please tell me you're not planning to show up at our parents' party with a marching band or something. I'm not planning to show up at their party at all. Then what are you planning? I'm planning to host my own Christmas celebration, here in Malibu, and I'm inviting everyone who matters to them, plus everyone who matters to me, plus everyone who's ever dismissed what I've built. Alex? Marcus, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to be honest. How long have you known that our parents' money is almost gone? The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. How did you find out? I've been watching their investment portfolio for years. Dad's hedge fund has been hemorrhaging money since 2019. They've been living off principal and credit for the past 3 years. The Connecticut house is mortgaged to the hilt. Their net worth is maybe 10% of what people think it is. They made me promise not to tell you. Why? Because they're terrified you'll find out and use it against them. I almost laughed. Use it against them? Marcus, I've made more money in the past 5 years than they've lost. I could bail them out with my quarterly bonus and not notice the difference. Then why haven't you? Because they've never asked. They'd rather maintain the illusion that I'm the failure and they're the success, even if it means going broke. So what are you planning to do? I'm planning to show them who I really am. All of them. The family. Their friends. Their social circle. Everyone who's ever assumed I was the disappointment. And Marcus? Yeah? I'm planning to make them an offer they can't refuse. After talking to Marcus, I realized the full scope of what I was about to undertake. This wasn't just about throwing a party or proving a point. This was about fundamentally changing the power dynamic in a family that had been built on assumptions, dismissals, and willful blindness. My parents had spent 30 years treating me like a failure, not because I was failing, but because acknowledging my success would require them to admit they'd been wrong about everything. It would mean facing the fact that their version of achievement was outdated, Their social connections were increasingly irrelevant, and their financial security was an illusion. But more than that, it would mean acknowledging that the son they'd written off had surpassed them in every measurable way. And for people whose identity was built on being superior, that was an impossible pill to swallow. So they'd chosen willful ignorance instead. It was easier to dismiss my achievements than to celebrate them. Easier to maintain their narrative than to face reality. But in 3 weeks, reality was coming to them whether they wanted it or not. Elena arrived exactly 1 hour after our phone call, driving a Tesla Model S and looking like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. She'd planned events for everyone from tech titans to Hollywood royalty, and her reputation was built on making impossible things happen with style and grace. "Alexander," she said, stepping out of her car and surveying my estate, "I've seen a lot of beautiful properties, but this is something else." "Thank you. Let me show you around, and then we can talk about what we're trying to create." I gave her the full tour. The main house with its great room that could accommodate 200 people for a sit-down dinner. The outdoor spaces with multiple terraces and infinity pools. The guest houses that could accommodate overnight visitors. The wine cellar, the home theater, the recording studio, and the grounds that stretched down to a private beach. "How many people are we talking about?" she asked as we finished the tour. 200 confirmed guests, but I want capacity for 300 in case people bring dates or unexpected guests. "And who exactly are we inviting?" I handed her a list I'd been working on during our tour. Her eyes widened as she scanned it. "Alex, this is everyone. Tech CEOs, Hollywood A-listers, politicians, musicians, athletes. You know all these people personally?" "Most of them, yes. The others are friends of friends, but they'll come if the event is compelling enough." "And your family?" "Will be invited along with everyone else. What they choose to do with that invitation is up to them." Elena looked back at the list, then at the estate, then at me. "Alex, I need to ask you something directly. What's the real purpose of this event? Because this isn't just a Christmas party. This is a statement." "You're right. It is a statement. For 30 years, my family has treated me like I was the failure while my brother was the success. They've never asked about my work, never visited my home, never shown any interest in what I've built. They've maintained this fiction that I'm unemployed or underemployed while living off family money. But you're worth more than they've ever imagined. And in 3 weeks, I'm going to show them exactly who Alexander Kane really is." Elena smiled. "I love it. Let's create an event so extraordinary that it redefines what's possible." Over the next week, Elena and I worked 18-hour days planning what she'd started calling the revelation. Every detail was designed to be perfect, memorable, and just slightly impossible. We started with the guest list. In addition to my personal contacts, we researched everyone who would be attending my parents' Christmas gathering and made sure to invite people who outranked them socially, professionally, and financially. Catherine's father, the hotel magnate, would receive an invitation. So would the Goldman Sachs partners who worked with Marcus, and the society families my mother was desperate to impress. The entertainment lineup was designed to be legendary. David Morrison had convinced 3 Grammy-winning artists to perform, including one who'd just finished a world tour and wasn't supposed to be available until February. We'd built a temporary stage on the main terrace, complete with professional sound and lighting systems that would rival any major concert venue. The catering was being handled by Michelin-starred chefs from 3 different restaurants, each creating a different course of the meal. The wine selection included bottles from my personal cellar that were worth more than most people's cars. The floral arrangements alone would cost more than most people's weddings. But the real centerpiece wasn't the food, the music, or the setting. It was the reveal. Elena had convinced me to create a presentation that would show, in stark detail, exactly what I'd built over the past 8 years: financial projections, company valuations, major partnerships, breakthrough technologies, awards, recognition, everything my family had missed because they'd never bothered to look. "It's not about rubbing their noses in it," Elena explained as we reviewed the presentation slides. "It's about education. They literally don't know who you are. This is your chance to introduce yourself properly. What if they don't come?" "Oh, they'll come. I've made sure of that." "How?" Elena smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say I've planted some information in the right social circles. By now, everyone in Greenwich, Connecticut knows that Alexander Kane is throwing the party of the decade, and everyone who matters will be there. Your parents would lose face if they didn't attend." "Elena, you're diabolical. I prefer strategically brilliant. Now, let's talk about your wardrobe. This is your debut as Alexander Kane, tech mogul. We need you to look the part." The final week before the party was a blur of last-minute preparations and confirmations. RSVPs had been pouring in, and the guest list read like a who's who of American power and influence: tech titans, entertainment moguls, political leaders, social media influencers with millions of followers, and old money families who'd been at the top of society pages for generations. Marcus called me every day with updates from Connecticut. "Mom's having a complete meltdown," he reported on Wednesday. "Everyone at the country club is talking about your party." Catherine's parents asked if they could get an invitation. 3 different society reporters have called asking for comments. What did she tell them? That she's very proud of both her sons and their diverse achievements. I almost choked on my coffee. And Dad? Is finally asking questions, real questions. He wanted to know exactly what your company does, who your investors are, what your revenue looks like. I think he's starting to realize he might have missed something important. What did you tell him? I told him to ask you directly. At your party. On Friday, 2 days before Christmas, I got a call I'd been expecting but dreading. "Alexander." My mother's voice was strained, careful. "I understand you're hosting some kind of gathering on Christmas Day." "I am. You should have received your invitation." "Yes, we did. It's very elegant. The calligraphy is beautiful." I waited. She was building up to something. "Alexander, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. Is this some kind of revenge? Are you doing this to embarrass your father and me?" The question hung in the air. It was such a perfect encapsulation of how she saw the world, that my success could only exist in relation to her, that my achievements could only be understood as reactions to her behavior. "Mom, this isn't about you. This is about me finally showing people who I actually am instead of who they've assumed I am." "But why now? Why like this?" "Because I'm tired of being invisible to my own family." "You're not invisible, Alexander. You're—" "What am I, Mom? Tell me how you describe me to someone who didn't know me." The silence stretched for nearly a minute. "You're my son." "What do I do for a living?" "You work in technology." "What kind of technology?" Another long pause. I've never really understood." "Mom, I've built a company that's worth $12 billion. I employ over 3,000 people. I've been featured on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Time magazine. I was named to MIT's list of innovators under 35. I've spoken at the World Economic Forum, advised 3 different presidents on technology policy, and my patents are used in devices that over 1 billion people interact with every day." "Alexander, and you think I work in technology? Somewhere. Doing something. Why didn't you tell us?" "I tried. For years I tried. But every time I mentioned my work, you changed the subject to Marcus's latest promotion or your social commitments. It became clear that you weren't interested in my success unless it fit your definition of what success should look like. So you decided to embarrass us publicly? No, Mom. I decided to stop hiding who I am to make you comfortable with who you think I should be. She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. Alexander, I don't understand any of this. I don't understand your world or your work, or why you felt like you had to keep it secret from us. It was never secret. It was just invisible to you. What do you want from us? It was the first time she'd ever asked me that question. I want you to see me. The real me. Not the version you've created in your minds, but the person I actually am. And if we can't, then at least you'll know what you're choosing not to see. Christmas morning arrived gray and foggy, but by 10 a.m., the Malibu marine layer had burned off to reveal perfect blue skies. Elena's team had been working since 4 a.m., and the transformation of my estate was nothing short of magical. White roses and orchids covered every surface. String quartets were warming up on the main terrace. The catering teams were preparing what would be remembered as one of the greatest meals in private party history. Photographers and videographers were capturing every detail for what Elena had convinced Vanity Fair would be a 12-page spread in their February issue. At noon, I stood in my master bedroom, adjusting the tie on a custom Tom Ford tuxedo that had been tailored specifically for this moment. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the first guests beginning to arrive. A convoy of Teslas, Bentleys, and Ferraris was making its way up my private drive. In 3 hours, I would stand before 200 of the most influential people in America and introduce them to the real Alexander Kane. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. In the car with Mom and Dad. She's been quiet for the entire drive. I think she's finally starting to understand what she's about to walk into. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. For 30 years, I'd been the family disappointment, the black sheep, the son who couldn't live up to expectations. In 30 minutes, I was going to show them who I'd become when I stopped trying to meet their expectations and started exceeding my own. It was time for Alexander Kane to make his debut. The first guests began arriving at 1 p.m., and within an hour, my estate had been transformed into something that looked like a cross between the Met Gala and a Silicon Valley product launch. Elena had been right. This wasn't just a party. It was an event that would be talked about for years. Elon Musk arrived in a Tesla Roadster and spent 20 minutes talking to my head of engineering about our latest AI developments. Jennifer Lawrence posed for photos with my head of marketing, who'd helped launch 3 Oscar-winning films through strategic tech partnerships. The CEOs of Apple, Google, and Microsoft were having an animated conversation about future collaboration opportunities near the infinity pool. But the moment I'd been waiting for came at 2:30 p.m. when a black Mercedes pulled up to my front entrance. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my great room, I watched my parents step out of the car, followed by Marcus and Catherine. My mother looked exactly as I'd expected. Perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, but with eyes that were taking in everything around her with growing shock. The scale of the estate, the caliber of the guests, the obvious expense of every detail. It was all clearly beyond what she'd imagined possible. My father looked confused, like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. He kept staring at the other guests, clearly recognizing faces from business magazines and news programs, trying to understand why they were all at his son's house. Catherine, Marcus's fiancée, looked like she was attending a state dinner. Her eyes were wide as she took in the scene, and I saw her whisper something to Marcus, who nodded grimly. And Marcus? My twin brother looked proud and nervous in equal measure. He was the only one who had any idea what was about to happen. I watched them approach the main entrance, where Elena was greeting guests personally. I saw her shake hands with my father, kiss my mother's cheek, and introduce herself as Alexander's event coordinator. The look of surprise on my mother's face when she realized this level of professionalism was normal for my events was worth the entire cost of the party. "Mr. Kane," Elena said, approaching me as my family entered the great room, "your parents have arrived." "How do they look?" "Like people who are starting to realize they might have fundamentally misunderstood something important." I straightened my tie and walked toward them, weaving through clusters of guests who nodded and smiled as I passed. Tech billionaires, Hollywood stars, political leaders. These were my peers, my friends, my professional network. But my parents had never met any of them, because they'd never bothered to learn about my world. Mother, father. I hugged them both, formally but warmly. "Catherine, welcome to my home." Catherine looked around the great room, at the vaulted ceilings, the museum-quality art, the wall of windows overlooking the Pacific, and I saw her swallow hard. "Alexander, your house is incredible." "Thank you. Please, let me introduce you to some people." Over the next hour, I walked my family through my world methodically and deliberately. I introduced my father to Tim Cook and watched him struggle to understand why the CEO of Apple was personally congratulating me on my latest product launch. I introduced my mother to Reese Witherspoon and watched her process the fact that an A-list actress was asking about my foundation's education initiatives. But the real moment of reckoning came when I introduced them to Victoria Chen, CEO of Pinnacle Hospitality, Catherine's father's biggest competitor. "Victoria," I said, "I'd like you to meet my parents, Richard and Victoria Kane, and my brother Marcus and his fiancée, Catherine Whitmore." Victoria's eyes lit up with recognition. "Whitmore? As in Whitmore Hotels?" "Catherine, your father and I have been friendly competitors for years." "Alexander, you didn't tell me you were connected to the Whitmore family?" Catherine looked confused. "I'm sorry, how do you know Alexander?" "Alexander's company has been handling the technology infrastructure for our global expansion. His AI hospitality platform has revolutionized how we manage guest experiences across 400 properties. We've been working together for 3 years." My mother's face had gone completely pale. "Alexander's company?" Victoria looked surprised. "Nexus Technologies? You must be so proud. Alexander has built one of the most innovative companies in the world. We've integrated his platforms across our entire portfolio. The efficiency gains alone have saved us hundreds of millions of dollars." Catherine turned to look at me with new eyes. "You work with Pinnacle Hospitality?" "His company doesn't just work with us," Victoria continued, clearly enjoying the conversation. "Nexus Technologies is one of our primary strategic partners. Alexander's innovations in AI-driven customer experience are being studied by business schools worldwide." My father finally found his voice. "I'm sorry, I think there might be some confusion. Alexander works in technology, but I wasn't aware." "Mr. Kane," Victoria said gently, "your son is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in America. Nexus Technologies is valued at over $12 billion. Alexander is personally worth more than most small countries' GDP." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother actually swayed on her feet, and Marcus quickly moved to steady her. "12 billion?" Catherine whispered. "The acquisition offers have been higher," Victoria said casually. "But Alexander's been selective about potential partnerships." "Very smart, actually. The right strategic partnership is worth more than a quick sale." I watched my parents' faces as the reality crashed over them. Their son, the disappointment, the failure, the one who couldn't hold a real job, was worth more money than they'd ever imagined existed. "I think," I said quietly, "we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." I led my family to my home office. The same room where I'd taken the call from my mother 3 weeks earlier. The walls were lined with awards, framed magazine covers, photos with world leaders, and patents that had changed entire industries. My mother sat down heavily in one of the chairs facing my desk and stared at the Fortune magazine cover where I'd been named Entrepreneur of the Year. The headline read, "The Invisible Billionaire: How Alexander Kane Built an Empire While No One Was Watching." "When?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "When what, Mom? When did this happen? When did you become this?" I sat down behind my desk, the same place where I'd made the decision to stop hiding 3 weeks ago. It's been happening for 8 years. Gradually, then all at once. But you never asked. And every time I tried to tell you, you changed the subject. My father was looking at the patent certificates on my wall. "These are real?" "They're real, Dad. Those 5 patents alone generate about $50 million a year in licensing revenue." Catherine spoke up, her voice shaky. "Alexander, I don't understand. If you've been this successful, why didn't you ever say anything?" I looked at her. This woman my family had been so eager to impress, whose family they'd been desperate to connect with. "Catherine, let me ask you something. In all the conversations you've had with my family over the past 6 months, how have they described me?" She looked uncomfortable. They said you were still finding your way, that you worked in tech but hadn't really settled on a career path yet. "And what did you conclude from that?" I assumed you were struggling, maybe living off family money while you figured things out." I nodded. And that assumption was comfortable for everyone. It maintained the family dynamic where Marcus was the success story and I was the cautionary tale. Marcus finally spoke. "Alex, I told them you were doing well. I told them your company was growing. You told them I was doing okay, and that my tech thing was working out. You never told them the scope of what I'd built because you were afraid it would upset the family balance?" My mother looked up from the magazine cover. "Alexander, why didn't you force us to listen?" "Because, Mom, I learned something important about success. Real success doesn't need external validation. It doesn't require other people's approval or understanding. For years, I chased your approval, trying to make you see what I was building. But at some point, I realized that your opinion of my success was completely irrelevant to the actual success. But we're your family. You're my family when it's convenient for you, when you need something from me, or when my success reflects well on you. But when I was just Alexander, working 18-hour days building something you didn't understand, I wasn't family then. I was an embarrassment you had to explain away." My father stood up and walked to the window overlooking the party. Outside, the most powerful people in America were enjoying themselves on my lawn, celebrating my success, treating me as a peer and a leader. "Richard," my mother said quietly, "our son is worth $12 billion. I heard her, Victoria. Our son owns this entire estate. Our son employs 3,000 people. Our son has been on the cover of every major business magazine in the world. I heard her. And we uninvited him from Christmas because we thought he would embarrass us." My father turned around, and for the first time in my life, he looked old. Not distinguished, not authoritative, just old and tired and very small. "Alexander," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Okay. How much do you know about our financial situation?" The question I'd been waiting for. "Everything, Dad. I've been tracking the family portfolio for years. I know about the hedge fund losses, the mortgage on the Connecticut house, the credit lines you've been living on. I know that your liquid net worth is about $15 million, down from nearly $200 million in 2019. My mother gasped. You've been watching our finances? I've been worried about you. Despite everything, you're still my parents. I wanted to make sure you weren't going to lose everything. And? My father asked. And you're not. You're financially stressed, but you're not broke. Yet. Catherine looked between my parents and me, clearly trying to understand the full scope of what she was witnessing. Alexander, my mother said slowly, why didn't you offer to help? Because you never asked. And more importantly, because helping you financially would have required me to admit I had money to help with, which would have required you to acknowledge that I was successful, which would have destroyed the narrative you'd built about your two sons. Marcus sat down heavily. Jesus, Alex. This is all so much more complicated than I realized. It's not complicated, Marcus. It's simple. For 8 years, I've been building something extraordinary while being treated like a failure by the people who should have been celebrating with me. I got tired of it, so I decided to show them what they'd missed. My father looked back out at the party. Those people out there, they're your friends? Some of them. Others are business partners, investors, collaborators. They're my peer group, Dad. They're the people who see my work, value my contributions, and treat me as an equal. And they all know what you've accomplished? They know because they were there when I accomplished it. They were the customers, the partners, the investors. They've been watching this company grow for years because they've been part of it. My mother stood up and walked to my desk, picking up the Forbes magazine. This article, it says you built everything without family money or connections. That's right. But we have money. We have connections. Why didn't you use them? I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd given birth to me but had never really seen me. Because I wanted to build something that was mine. Something that existed because of my vision and my work, not because of who my parents were or what schools I attended or what social circles I belonged to. But it would have been easier. Easier isn't the point, Mom. The point was building something extraordinary. Something that changed how people live and work. Something that mattered. Catherine spoke up again. Alexander, I have to ask. Why now? Why this party? Why this revelation? I smiled, thinking back to the phone call 3 weeks ago. Because 3 weeks ago, my mother uninvited me from Christmas. She said I would embarrass the family in front of your parents and their important friends. She said my presence would be a distraction from Marcus's success. Catherine looked horrified. She uninvited you from Christmas? She did. And in that moment, I realized I was done being ashamed of who I am to make other people comfortable with who they think I should be. My mother was crying now, quietly but steadily. Alexander, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, Mom. But sorry doesn't change 8 years of being invisible to my own family. What do you want from us now? My father asked. How do we fix this? I looked around the room, at my family, at the evidence of my success surrounding us, at the party continuing outside my windows. I want you to decide who you want to be going forward. You can keep pretending this conversation never happened, that you never learned about my success, that everything can go back to the way it was. Or you can start seeing me for who I actually am and build a relationship based on reality instead of assumptions. And if we choose wrong, then you'll continue being the parents of Marcus Kane, successful investment banker, and you'll stop being the parents of Alexander Kane entirely. The silence in the room was broken by Elena knocking on the door. Alexander? I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's time for your presentation. Everyone's gathered in the great room. Right. The presentation. The final piece of today's revelation. What presentation? My mother asked. The part where I introduce myself properly to everyone who's never bothered to ask who I am. I stood up and straightened my jacket. Outside my office, 200 of the most powerful people in America were waiting to hear from me. My family could choose to be part of that audience, or they could choose to remain outsiders to my world. "You're all welcome to watch," I said, "but understand that after today, everything changes. I'm done being invisible, and I'm done making myself smaller to make other people comfortable." I walked to the door, then turned back one more time. "The choice is yours." The great room had been transformed into a presentation venue, with Elena's team setting up a small stage and projection system while guests found seats on the couches and chairs arranged throughout the space. The energy in the room was electric. Everyone could sense that something significant was about to happen. As I walked to the front of the room, I saw my family enter quietly and find seats in the back. My mother's eyes were red from crying, but she was composed. My father looked like a man trying to solve an impossible equation. Catherine kept looking around the room with new eyes, probably recognizing for the first time that she was surrounded by people whose net worth exceeded her family's by orders of magnitude. And Marcus? Marcus looked proud and nervous in equal measure. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, looking out at faces I'd known for years and others I was meeting for the first time. "Most of you know me as Alexander Kane, founder and CEO of Nexus Technologies, but some of you are meeting me for the first time today, including members of my own family." A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the typical tech presentation they were expecting. For the past 8 years, I've been building a company while maintaining what you might call a dual identity. In Silicon Valley, in boardrooms, at conferences and industry events, I'm Alexander Kane, entrepreneur and innovator. But to my family and the social circle I grew up in, I've been Alexander Kane, the son who never quite lived up to expectations. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, a photo of my family from last Christmas, where I stood in the background while Marcus posed front and center with our parents. Today, I'm retiring that second identity permanently. Today, I'm introducing everyone in this room, including my parents, to the complete picture of what I've built and who I've become. The next slides were a comprehensive overview of Nexus Technologies: revenue growth, employee count, breakthrough innovations, major partnerships, industry recognition. But I wasn't just presenting to investors or colleagues. I was presenting to my mother, who'd thought I was unemployed; to my father, who'd assumed I was living off family money; to Catherine, who'd been told I was the family disappointment. 8 years ago, I continued, I started Nexus Technologies with a simple thesis: artificial intelligence could revolutionize how humans interact with complex systems, not just computers or phones, but everything: homes, cars, workplaces, entire cities. I showed them our first product, a simple AI assistant that had evolved into the platform now used by over 500 million people worldwide. I showed them our partnerships with major corporations, our breakthrough patents, our expansion into new markets. Today, Nexus Technologies employs 3,247 people across 12 countries. Our technology platform powers everything from smart city infrastructure to autonomous vehicle navigation. Our AI models are used by 73 of the Fortune 100 companies. Our annual revenue exceeds $800 million. I could see my parents in the back of the room, watching the presentation with expressions of growing shock and understanding. This wasn't just their son giving a talk. This was a tech billionaire explaining how he'd built an empire they'd never even known existed. But the real measure of success, I said, clicking to a slide showing photos from various humanitarian projects, isn't financial. It's impact. Our technology has helped reduce energy consumption in smart buildings by 40%. Our traffic management systems have reduced commute times in major cities by an average of 23%. Our healthcare AI has helped diagnose rare diseases in children who might otherwise have gone undiagnosed for years. The room was completely silent now. Even the tech billionaires in attendance, people who'd built their own world-changing companies, were impressed by the scope of what I'd accomplished. Next year, I continued, we'll be announcing partnerships that will bring our AI platform to every smartphone, every electric vehicle, and every smart home device manufactured by our partner companies. We estimate that by 2026, over 2 billion people will interact with Nexus technology every day. I clicked to the final slide. A photo of me at my desk, looking out over the Pacific, with the simple caption, Alexander Kane, founder and CEO, Nexus Technologies. I'm telling you all this not to boast, but because today marks an important transition for me personally. For 8 years, I've been building this company while maintaining the fiction that I was somehow unsuccessful or unfocused. I did this to avoid disrupting family dynamics, to prevent uncomfortable conversations, to allow other people to maintain their assumptions about who I was and what I was capable of. I looked directly at my parents. But I've learned that hiding your success to make other people comfortable is a form of betrayal. Betrayal of yourself, your employees, your investors, and everyone who believes in what you're building. The applause started slowly, then built to a sustained ovation. Tech leaders, entertainment executives, politicians, and social influencers all rose to their feet, celebrating not just my company's success, but the courage it had taken to finally claim it publicly. As the applause died down, I made one final announcement. Today also marks the launch of the Kane Foundation, which will be funded with $1 billion from my personal wealth. The foundation will focus on education technology, specifically providing advanced AI tutoring systems to underserved schools worldwide. Another round of applause, but I held up my hand for silence. The foundation will be run independently, with its own board and leadership team. But I'm pleased to announce that my brother Marcus Kane has agreed to join the board as our financial oversight director, bringing his expertise in institutional investment management to help ensure the foundation's resources are used effectively. Marcus looked shocked. We'd discussed this possibility, but I'd never confirmed he'd be willing to take on the role. But as the room applauded again, I saw him nod acceptance, understanding that this was my way of inviting him into my world as an equal partner rather than a family obligation. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for 8 years of support, partnership, and friendship, as I've built something I'm genuinely proud of. Now, let's celebrate. As guests began mingling again and the formal presentation ended, I found myself surrounded by congratulations, business cards, and requests for follow-up meetings. But I kept one eye on my family, watching as they processed what they'd just witnessed. Elena appeared at my side with a champagne flute and a satisfied smile. "How do you feel?" "Like I just introduced myself to my parents for the first time." "And how do they look?" I glanced over at my mother, who was being approached by other guests eager to congratulate her on her son's success. She looked overwhelmed but was trying to maintain her composure. Like people who are realizing they missed the most important story of their lives because they were reading the wrong book. 20 minutes later, my father approached me as I was talking with Tim Cook about potential collaboration opportunities. "Alexander, could I speak with you privately?" "Of course, Dad." "Tim, we'll continue this conversation soon." We walked to a quiet corner of the terrace, away from the other guests. The sun was beginning to set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that made my estate look even more spectacular than usual. "Son," my father began, then stopped. "I don't even know how to start this conversation." "Start wherever feels right. I've been thinking about something you said earlier. About us never asking about your life, your work. And I realized you were absolutely right. We never did ask. We just assumed." "Why do you think that was?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the ocean, because asking would have required us to admit we might be wrong about something fundamental. It was easier to maintain our assumptions than to face the possibility that we'd completely misunderstood our own son. And now? Now I'm standing at a party that costs more than most people make in a lifetime, surrounded by people I only recognize from magazine covers and news programs, listening to my son casually discuss billion-dollar partnerships with the CEO of Apple. He turned to look at me. Alexander, I don't think I've ever felt smaller in my life. That wasn't my intention, Dad. I know it wasn't. That's what makes this so much worse. You weren't trying to humiliate us. You were just finally showing us who you really are. And the fact that it feels humiliating says everything about us and nothing about you. We stood in silence for a few minutes, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Alexander, I need to ask you something else, and I need you to be honest. Okay. The financial help you mentioned earlier, is that offer still open? What kind of help are you thinking about? We're going to lose the house. Maybe not this year, but soon. The mortgage, payments are getting impossible, and I don't have enough liquid assets to cover them much longer. I nodded. I'd seen this coming in their financial statements for months. Dad, what if I told you I wanted to buy the house from you? Buy it. Why would you want our house? Because it's where I grew up. Because it has history. Because I can afford to maintain it properly, and you can't. What would you do with it? Turn it into a retreat center for young entrepreneurs, a place where people building innovative companies could come to work, collaborate, and recharge. I'd call it the Kane Institute. His eyes widened. You'd put our family name on it? I'd put my family name on it. The question is whether you want to be part of that family going forward. Alexander, Dad, I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to think about it carefully before you respond. Okay. I'll buy the Connecticut house for $20 million, significantly above market value. I'll pay off all your debts and set up a $10 million trust fund that will provide you and Mom with a comfortable income for the rest of your lives. Alexander, I'm not finished. In exchange, I want you and Mom to go to family therapy. Real therapy, with a professional who specializes in family dynamics and communication. I want you to understand why our relationship developed the way it did, and I want to learn how to be your son without compromising who I am. And if we refuse, then you refuse. I'm not attaching strings to my love or my financial help, but I am attaching conditions to having a real relationship going forward. My father was quiet for a long time, absorbing the magnitude of what I was offering. Alexander, why would you do this for us? After everything? Because you're my parents. Because despite everything that's happened, I love you. And because I'm finally in a position where I can help without sacrificing my own success or identity. And Marcus? Marcus is welcome to be part of whatever relationship we build, or he can maintain his own separate relationship with all of us. That's his choice. What about Catherine? What about the wedding? I smiled. Dad, I'm worth $12 billion. I think I can afford to throw Marcus and Catherine a wedding that makes today's party look like a casual barbecue. For the first time all day, my father smiled back. Alexander, your mother and I have made some terrible mistakes. I know. We've missed 8 years of your success because we were too proud and too blind to see it. I know that too. And we've treated you like a disappointment when you're actually the most successful person in our family. Dad, success isn't a competition. Marcus is successful too, in his own way. The problem was never that you celebrated his achievements. The problem was that you couldn't see mine. Can we fix this? I don't know, but I'm willing to try if you are. He extended his hand and I shook it. Partners? Family, I corrected. Finally. As the party wound down that evening, I found myself standing in my great room, surrounded by the debris of what had been an extraordinary day. Empty champagne bottles, remnants of a meal that would be remembered for years, and the satisfied exhaustion of having finally told my truth to everyone who mattered. Marcus found me there, loosening his tie and looking around at my home with fresh eyes. "Alex, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not fighting harder for you all these years. For letting Mom and Dad maintain their delusions about who you were. For being complicit in keeping you invisible." "Marcus, you couldn't have changed their minds. They had to see for themselves. But I could have tried harder. I could have made them listen. And if you had, they would have dismissed it as brotherly loyalty. This way, they had to confront the truth directly." Still, he sat down on my couch, looking out at the ocean through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Alex, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When you were building all this, when you were becoming this person, did you ever feel angry? About being overlooked?" I thought about his question. "For a while, yes." But then I realized that anger was just another form of seeking their approval. I was angry that they couldn't see my success, which meant I was still defining success by their recognition. When did that change? When I stopped needing their permission to be successful, when I started building for the right reasons instead of the wrong ones. And what were the right reasons? To create something meaningful, to solve problems that mattered, to build a company that made the world a little bit better. Marcus nodded slowly. "I think I've been building my career for the wrong reasons." "What do you mean?" "I've been chasing promotions and bonuses and recognition because that's what they wanted for me, but I've never asked myself what I wanted to build." "It's not too late to figure that out." "The foundation you mentioned? Were you serious about me joining the board?" "Completely serious. If you want it." "What would that involve?" "Helping oversee the investment and distribution of $1 billion to transform education for underserved kids worldwide. Using your financial expertise to make sure every dollar has maximum impact." "Alex, that's meaningful work, Marcus. That's building something that matters." He was quiet for a moment. "Would I have to leave Goldman?" "Eventually, probably. The foundation will be a full-time commitment once we're operational. But Marcus, you're 32 years old and you've already proven everything you need to prove on Wall Street. The question is, what do you want to prove to yourself?" "I want to prove I can build something that makes a difference." "Then let's build it together." My mother appeared in the doorway, having changed out of her party dress into something more casual. She looked exhausted but somehow lighter than she had in years. "Alexander, may I join you?" "Of course, Mom." She sat down across from Marcus and me, looking around the room that had been filled with some of the most powerful people in America just hours earlier. "I've been thinking about something you said during your presentation. About hiding your success to make other people comfortable." "What about it?" "I realize I've been doing the same thing in a way. I've been hiding from the truth about our finances, about your father's business struggles, about my own fears of not being good enough for the social circle we've been trying to maintain." "Mom." "No, let me finish. I've spent so much energy trying to project an image of success that I stopped noticing when real success was happening right in front of me." She looked directly at me. "Alexander, I've watched you your entire life, and I've always known you were special. Even as a child, you saw things differently, thought about problems in ways that amazed me. Then why didn't you support what I was building?" "Because I was terrified it would take you away from us. Your mind, your vision, your ambition. It was all so much bigger than our world. I thought if I acknowledged how extraordinary you were, you'd realize you didn't need us anymore." "Mom, that's not how family works." "I know that now. But at the time, it felt safer to keep you small than to risk losing you to something bigger." Marcus spoke up. "Mom, You didn't lose him to something bigger. You lost him by trying to keep him small. She nodded, tears starting again. I know, and I don't know how to fix 8 years of blindness and dismissal. You start, I said, by seeing me as I am now, today. Not as who you thought I was, not as who you wanted me to be, but as who I actually am. And who are you, Alexander? For the first time in my life, I could answer that question without qualification or apology. I'm Alexander Kane. I'm an entrepreneur who's built a company that's changing how people interact with technology. I'm someone who employs over 3,000 people and takes that responsibility seriously. I'm a person who's accumulated significant wealth and wants to use it to solve meaningful problems. I'm your son, but I'm not your employee or your project or your disappointment. Are you happy? She asked. The question surprised me. What do you mean? I mean, with all this success, all this wealth, all these achievements, are you happy? I looked around my home, thought about the work I was doing, the problems I was solving, the relationships I'd built. Yes, I said, I'm happy. For the first time in my adult life, I'm completely, authentically happy. Good, she said simply. That's all I ever really wanted for you. 3 months later, I was sitting in my Connecticut childhood home, now officially the Kane Institute for Entrepreneurship, watching as the first cohort of young founders worked on their companies in ISA, the same rooms where I'd once felt so misunderstood. The house had been completely renovated but retained its essential character. The dining room where I'd sat through countless uncomfortable family meals was now a collaboration space where brilliant young minds tackled impossible problems. The living room where I'd been lectured about my lack of direction was now a presentation hall where entrepreneurs pitched their world-changing ideas. My parents had moved to a beautiful condo in Greenwich, purchased with part of the proceeds from selling me the house. They were attending therapy twice a week and had made remarkable progress in understanding their own patterns and behaviors. My mother had become an advocate for the Institute, using her social connections to help young entrepreneurs access resources and mentorship. Marcus had given his notice at Goldman Sachs and was now working full-time as the Kane Foundation's chief operating officer. He'd discovered a passion for education policy that had been buried under years of pursuing other people's definitions of success. He and Catherine were planning a wedding for the following year, an event that would celebrate their love rather than their social connections. But the most significant change was in how my family saw me, spoke about me, and related to me. I was no longer the family disappointment or the son who couldn't find his way. I was Alexander Kane, CEO, philanthropist, and someone they were genuinely proud to call family. That evening, as I walked through the Institute one final time before heading back to California, I found a note left on my old childhood desk by one of the entrepreneurs in residence. Thank you for creating a place where being different is an advantage, not a liability. Thank you for showing us that success doesn't require permission from people who don't understand your vision. Most of all, thank you for proving that the best revenge against people who underestimate you isn't revenge at all. It's success they never saw coming. I smiled and put the note in my pocket. Outside, the Connecticut snow was beginning to fall, and through the windows of my childhood home, I could see young entrepreneurs working late into the night, building the future while the rest of the world slept. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Watching the news coverage of the Kane Foundation's first grants. So proud of what you and Marcus are building together. Love, Mom. I typed back. Love you too, Mom. See you at Sunday dinner. Sunday dinners had become a new tradition, weekly gatherings where my parents, Marcus, Catherine, and I actually talked about our work, our goals, our challenges, and our successes. Where being Alexander Kane, CEO, was just as welcome as being Alexander Kane, son and brother. As I drove back toward the airport, I thought about that phone call 3 months ago when my mother had uninvited me from Christmas. At the time, it had felt like the final rejection, the ultimate proof that I would never be good enough for my family's approval. But now I understood it differently. It wasn't rejection, it was liberation. It was the moment I finally stopped seeking permission to be successful and started claiming the success I'd already built. Sometimes the greatest gift people can give you is their inability to see your worth. It forces you to stop depending on their vision and start trusting your own. I was Alexander Kane. I was worth $12 billion. I employed thousands of people, helped millions more through my technology, and was using my wealth to solve problems that mattered. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Not because anyone else said it was enough, but because I knew it was extraordinary. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told your dreams were too big, or your vision was unrealistic, if you've ever been treated like a disappointment while you were building something amazing, remember this. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Success doesn't require permission. Recognition is nice, but it's not necessary. And the best revenge against people who underestimate you isn't revenge at all. It's success they never saw coming. Thank you for joining me on this journey from invisible to invaluable. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family expectations and personal success. Drop a comment below and let's build a community of people who refuse to stay small to make others comfortable. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. You just need the courage to stop hiding who you already are. This is Alexander Kane, reminding you to know your worth, build your empire, and never, ever apologize for being successful. Until next time, keep building something that matters.